Good evening. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. I would like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. Later on, I will be speaking to Joe Bloen on the legal mechanisms with regards to not just the South Africans, but the many other citizens that have been abducted by the Israeli army during the global Samud flotilla, which was close to the coast of Gaza. Well, speaking of Gaza, and Hamas and other Palestinian factions, according to reports, are leaning towards accepting US President Donald Trump's plan to end the genocide in Gaza, and they will present the group's responses to Egyptian and Qatari mediators. Now, the plan, which US President Trump presented alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, is a 20-point proposal which, if agreed to, would see a soft ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all remaining captives, and a number of Palestinian hostages in Israel. But many are calling this a plan that seems to have contradictions to it. The reason being is that nobody really knows whether this will allow for a broader end to the occupation by Israel. Joining me now with regards to this discussion, I'd like to welcome Inès Abdel Razek, who is the co-director of the Palestinian Institute for Public Diplomacy. Inès, assalamu alaikum. Shukran so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Inès, and again, I want to start with that word contradiction, because when you read the 20-point plan, it's quite clear it doesn't speak to really the deeper problems that many of the Palestinian residents of Gaza are facing. There just seems to be a plan that's put there, and they either have to accept it or not.
That is very clear. It's absolutely a plan that would cement the colonization of Palestine by Israel. But I think further than this, the very immediate problem, right? Like, I think the very urgency is indeed to get to a permanent ceasefire, to end the brutal genocide and the bloodshed at this moment, and let the humanitarian aid in. But this plan even doesn't guarantee that, because it's so vague, because of the way it's written, and the articles are maintaining the Israeli army presence, the Israeli army occupation, because the very clear point that is basically foreseen is the release of the hostages. But after the release of the hostages, there is no guarantee, no mechanism, no timeline for an Israeli withdrawal. And therefore, it clearly opens the door, leaves wiggle room for Israel to resume the bombing and to resume the destruction of Gaza.
And here's the thing, Inès. If we take, for example, the majority of the Israeli public, the sentiment there is quite clear. Let's get the hostages, right? And then after that, man, you can do what you want to do for the Israeli army. And this is where the concern lies. As long as the Israeli army is circling around Gaza, it's quite clear they will find any or every reason to continue this ethnic cleansing. We're seeing it right now. Reports had indicated that the Al-Rashid Road, which is, of course, the main coastal route linking Gaza City to the south, continues to be bombed by Israel. And on that note, one can see that Israel really has no clear intention to want to end this genocide anytime soon.
Your last sentence, I think, summarized it all. Israel has no intention, and never has, to stop its genocide, its ethnic cleansing, and its apartheid against the Palestinians. And I think this is what we need to understand, because here it's not about good faith negotiations. Whatever the Palestinian factions are discussing, it's coercion. It's basically they're being forced through the violence, through the genocide, through the entire destruction of schools, universities, water infrastructure, electricity, and the very people to this point they are today. So basically you have Israel destroying everything and then setting the agenda and negotiations on their terms. And so basically this is not negotiations. We're a people that are basically asked to negotiate the end to the genocide against us. We are asked to compromise again and again on what is fundamental rights. Rights are not to be negotiated. There are fundamental rights. And that's what the Palestinians are calling for. And so in this moment, what needs to happen, and the obligations of states, is not to engage in the nitty-gritties of this plan, is to clearly pressure the US and Israel to stop this genocide. because without pressure, without accountability, without their legal obligations, that includes taking measures for economic, diplomatic, financial sanctions, Israel will not obviously abandon its track, which has always been since 77 years the exact same track, the exact same trajectory to colonize more.
Inès, I want to quote the Pakistani diplomat that was, of course, sitting when with the other Arab and Muslim leaders in this negotiation. He said that a number of what was written was not what was agreed upon at last week's United Nations General Assembly meeting. Now it comes to when Benjamin Netanyahu, and there are certain reports there that he had altered some of the 20-point plans or was not happy with some of it. Now, here lies the question. When you are sitting and negotiating ceasefires, there has to be the other party. And unfortunately, what we're seeing here is that Hamas was not involved in this. It's quite clear, Inès, that all of this is not being done in good faith because it's pieces of paper that is shoved into Hamas's face and they have no choice but to accept it. What we're seeing is not really good faith being done to have both parties being negotiated in this.
Yes, and it's, again, long time that the international community should recognize that Israel is not a state of good faith. It continues to lie, it continues to use bad faith and tactics to buy time, buy space, to further control and to further colonize. And that's what's happening here. We've seen it in the past, whether it was in the 90s with the Oslo Agreement. They kept buying time, they kept dragging up negotiations so that they would control further territory, they would colonize more, and they would control more so that then we would negotiate, breadcrumbs out of that. And so that's what's happening now. And clearly, once again, Palestine is being decided upon without Palestinians. That plan, as you say, was designed by the US that has been sponsoring this genocide for the past 2 years and has been funding the Israeli military for years. And so they're not a mediation of good faith. And then it was seen and it was amended by Netanyahu himself. They got amendments that were even going further into their interests. And it was also leaked that, Arab states and Muslim states had given some amendments, not to be honest, the what we need from them, which is, again, energy embargoes, military embargoes, to cut ties with Israel and to basically saying that the legal obligation is for Israel to stop this genocide. But they provided some amendments. None of them were taken into account. That's what diplomatically, I think, raised oppositions. But unfortunately, again, what we need from the Muslim world and the Arab world is not merely amendments, again, engaging in good faith in a plan that is not a good faith plan. We need them to put more pressure.
And meanwhile, while Hamas, I beg your pardon, is busy studying the plan, you've got Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz making statements, and one can consider this clearly to be genocidal, where he said any civilians, and I want to stick on that word, civilians who remain in Gaza City would be considered terrorists or terror supporters. Again, we're talking about good faith. It's quite clear that Israel wants to maintain the killing and the slaughter for as long as they can. And statements like that justify it.
They have been making statements such as these from day one. And we've been saying that this is a genocide from 2 years. And no one has listened until, international experts started saying it, scholars, the UN, and then some Israelis. It's very clear that, again, Israel has a plan that they're not even hiding. And the problem is that then you have Western states and you have countries that instead of taking their obligations, instead of taking the bold and necessary political and legal measures that they need to take to stop this genocide, to stop Israel, they are paying lip service to peace, using like the two-state solution and other very empty declarations and mantra, and putting statements of condemnation without doing anything. So Israel can continue in total impunity, and they can say there will be no Palestinian states. They can say they will continue to, there is no civilians in Gaza, that we are animals. And they can continue to do that and do it on the ground and in total impunity. And so, again, the problem fundamentally with this plan is that it won't end Israel's impunity. On the contrary, it's going to give leverage for Israel to resume the violence and continue the violence in other forms.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Inès Abdel Razek. We're going to be speaking on, of course, whether Hamas will accept the ceasefire plan, because it speaks to them not having any control of the enclave. Do remember that they had won an election, a democratic election, which allowed them to have that power within Gaza. But of course, the other burning question, Tony Blair, what is his role with regards to the so-called Board of Peace chaired by US President Donald Trump? Do stay tuned. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm still in conversation with Inès Abdel Razek, who is the co-director of the Palestinian Institute for Public Diplomacy. Inès, again, shukran for staying with us. Inès, I want to touch on this Board of Peace. And there's, of course, a gentleman, I'd like to use that word quite loosely, Tony Blair, this individual. This is the same Tony Blair that sent troops to Afghanistan. We saw the result there. We then go to Iraq. Him, along with George W. Bush, made the statement that there are weapons of mass destruction. The UN went there. There was nothing of that. And millions of Iraqis had died. This isn't a good plan, having him in charge of Gaza. We're already close to 70,000. Even if we have to go as high as maybe 100, 150,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israel. It's just not a good idea.
There's two things. There's the fact that Tony Blair, Netanyahu, and Trump belong to the ICC. They are war criminals. And so, again, trying to think that they're good faith actors to drive a just peace and stability in this region is utter, it's again a Western domination idea. And the second thing is that the very idea that a foreign entity, right, that again, a bunch of Western imperialists would control Palestine or part of Palestine is seriously discussed in 2025. I mean, it's like we're in the early 20th century, late 19th century, discussing the British Empire and the Western empires colonizing the global South. I mean, this is what it is. And so it draws on this idea, on this very colonial idea that we Palestinians cannot rule ourselves and that they have to choose for us who's a good Palestinian and who is a bad Palestinian. It is for the Palestinians. This is our fundamental right to self-determination, to decide for ourselves. And I think here it's very clear that they're just trying to, divide the cake. And we've seen that, of course, multiple times in Palestine's history, in histories of other countries, in histories of South Africa, right? When you have like external colonizers who deciding, who gets which part of the territory and who decides for the territory. So it is obviously extremely dangerous. It has nothing to do with peace. I think no one should entertain this very idea. Even if they bring, one or two token Palestinians to be part of that, it won't change the fundamental problem with this very idea. And so I think the entire agenda of trying to exclude Hamas from a political table is also unacceptable for Palestinians, because, again, it's not for foreign entities and for states to decide who gets to sit at the Palestinian table. We are the ones to choose who represent us, and no one should be excluded. And you reminded what that exclusion has done. In the past, it has led to a brutal blockade of 20 years, of almost 20 years on Gaza, followed by a genocide. And so one cannot detach also that reality from today's reality.
Inès, and here's the thing when it comes to democracy, which of course the West uses as a method of how the world needs to be run. Ismail Haniyeh, who of course was killed last year in Iran, won the Palestinian election. It's a very similar conversation I had with Dr. Mustafa Barghouti during the week. And yet, this is the same Hamas who, of course, won these elections that are being completely sidelined. And you find a paradox in this, don't we, Inès, that when the West wants to use democracy, they will use it on their terms. And we're seeing it right now occurring in Gaza.
Absolutely. The entire engineering of the situation, whether it's the military engineering, the social engineering, the economic engineering, all of it is done from Israel and its closest ally, the US, and then the broader Western community, is to prevent the Palestinians from being free. And to prevent the Palestinians from being free and liberating themselves, the very mechanism that they're putting in place and all of the tactics they're using is to demobilize the Palestinians, to prevent the emergence of a national movement, a liberation movement, to prevent the formation of a body that would effectively represent Palestinians. And so today it's very convenient for the international community to have as official interlocutors Mahmoud Abbas and the PA that's controlled by one faction, and to exclude another. When at some point, when Hamas was created, it was very convenient for them to support Hamas against the PLO that was dominated by Fatah. So this is political engineering. This is foreign interference that is meant to prevent the actual emergence of a united Palestinian front against the Israeli colonial domination. And so this is what we're fighting against. And this is what the international community, if they continue to go through the same mistakes of that foreign interference, trying to impose who's a good Palestinian and who's a bad Palestinian, who represents us, we will continue to see the violence we see today.
Inès, I want to talk on leadership from a Palestinian perspective. The Palestinian Authority divides opinion, and a lot of Palestinians, from my understanding, and a lot of them who I speak to, are not really in favor of the Palestinian Authority and the way its rule is being conducted. When I read the statements, it's kind of, I won't say muted, but very mild in its supposed condemnation of this 20-point plan. And I think that's where a lot of Palestinians feel there's supposedly a lack of leadership in trying to pressure the West to try and have a plan which is in favor of the Palestinian people of Gaza, and to try and make sure that their rights are not being violated. But when you look at the statements from the Palestinian Authority, it just doesn't seem to be in favor of the Palestinians and their rights.
I think what often the people, like the public opinion, the viewers don't necessarily understand very well, because it can seem complex, is what is the Palestinian Authority? The Palestinian Authority has been created through the Oslo Agreement. It was never meant to represent the Palestinians. So the PA controls only 15% of the West Bank. The leadership of the PA that has completely hijacked and delegitimized the PLO who is now in control around Mahmoud Abbas. No one is even bringing their legitimacy today. They've not been elected. No one has chosen them. No one trusts them. So the PA leadership today has no legitimacy, and they know that. They've been irrelevant in the past 2 years, and so they're trying to regain their legitimacy. This branch of a faction that has nothing to offer for Palestinian freedom. Now, the PA itself, in order to survive, the PA is much like the Bantustan's, authority back then. It's literally a colonized authority. So in order to take any decision to go out, Mahmoud Abbas could not go to the UN because Israel decides that. Israel decides on what goes in and goes out in terms of food production, trucks, etc. The taxes, Israel is retaining all of the taxes that belong to the Palestinian Authority. So in order to exist, in order to continue operating, the PA leadership needs to answer to Israel. And that's why they're subservient to their own domination. They're not a sovereign entity. And so at this stage, what the Palestinians are asking is that we need a transformed PLO. We need actually a Palestinian National Front that includes all of the factions, all of the Palestinian representation, that will drive a strategy forward to confront the Israeli genocide, to confront the occupation. And that's what the PA leadership is preventing. That's what Israel is preventing, and the PA leadership is following. That's what the US is preventing, and the international community is preventing. Why? Because maintaining the PA leadership in place is convenient to continue the Israeli domination. So one goes with the other.
Inès, we've got 2 minutes. As we stand, it's October the 2nd, 2025. Hamas is still reviewing that ceasefire plan. Even though they accept it, we really don't know the future of the Palestinian residents of Gaza. And when you look at this plan, it really seems bleak. It seems not that positive. And one can only use one word to describe this: occupation. Because there still is going to be an occupation, and it doesn't really address anything that many of the Palestinian people have been asking for, and it's their right of self-determination.
Yes, and I think right now in the very, very short term, those who, whether it's countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia and many countries in the global majority like South Africa and others in coalitions, again, have to put good faith and pressure on Israel, because what needs to come out of any plan at this stage is unconditional and permanent ceasefire. The entry and unconditional entry of all humanitarian goods and all goods in general, the lift to the blockade. Because again, it's one thing, the problem is that Israel is really leading us to then negotiate one truck or another. So this is really the urgency now, so that the killing can stop. And so that our people in Gaza can live, because that's what we're listening and hearing from our brothers and sisters in Gaza. They want to live. They want to have the bombs stop. And any plan right now needs to ensure that this can be guaranteed, because they cannot be tortured by more false hopes of another failed ceasefire that Israel can violate in impunity.
Inès, absolute pleasure having you on. Shukran so much for joining us. Assalamu alaikum.
Shukran.
That's Inès Abdel Razek, the co-director of the Palestinian Institute for Public Diplomacy. After the break, it's the news that has, of course, been making headlines throughout the day. There are passengers that have been taken by the Israeli forces on the global Sumud flotilla. We're going to be discussing the legal element with this. My conversation with Joe Bluen will be up after this break.